The world of Buffalo Black media is as vibrant as ever. The advent of social media has created an avenue for many to flourish in the areas of filmmaking, photography, music videos, podcasting, and various online content creations. In the local mainstream, we even see more people of color in the local news stations, not just in front of the camera, but behind it as well. Yet we know all things have a beginning, a foundation. And this new movement, as vibrant as it is, would not be possible without the contribution of those who stood at the forefront and opened the doors for many of the new communication specialists to walk through. And in this presentation, the Buffalo History Channel will acknowledge those trailblazers and productions. As a disclaimer, we cannot promise that the whole story will be told, but through the research that we have gathered, we will be dealing with a certain area and timeline. We will be dealing with blacks on TV, particularly through the public affairs programs, as they were very key in highlighting black faces and black issues in the Buffalo community. Our timeline will go from the 1960s up until the early 1990s. We cannot begin to tell this story without mentioning the contribution of the Buffalo Black Media Coalition and its founder, John Smith, as the first advocate for black media in the city of Buffalo.
I began to get a better picture of what was happening in terms of communication and how important it was to our community, because many articles that came out in the paper and the way they were dealing with us in the news, not newsprint, but television and radio, we were always on the negative side of things because they had no sensitivity to the issues and the concerns that we were trying to address at that time. So I began a little investigation, what could be done about blocking or changing some of their attitudes. And I learned at that time about the Federal Communications Commission and the kinds of rules and regulations that they had imposed upon telecommunications. And as a result, I started doing file reviews and found pretty much the same thing, that African Americans were very scarce in terms of their employment history, and that we never did write many letters or complain about things that was happening and was addressing us in our community. So as a result, we formulated the Buffalo Black Media Coalition.
In February of 1964, WGR Channel 2 sets the milestone in the city of Buffalo by premiering the first weekly Negro TV program titled Portraits of My People, hosted by Malcolm Ernai. The first episode featured the Emmanuel Temple Chorale, the Gale Singers, and Bangi Owalo. Ernai also worked on the program with Rosalie Smith and Fred Willis. The influence of black media at this time was directly on par with the civil rights and black power movements which were beginning to take shape. On a national level, a number of shows featuring black faces talking about black issues were beginning to come into many homes via the small screen. Most notably were shows like Soul and Black Journal. The black community of Buffalo, as well as the college campuses, also began their own forays into media communication.
At that time, I had been working with a couple of other organizations in the history of Buffalo's communications on the black hand side. One was Community Communications Foundation, CCF, which was the brainchild and creation of Brother Robert Gore, Bob Gore, who's on to New York and doing great things with Bob Gore Communications. It worked out of Lincoln Memorial Church, and we basically were also promoting the same types of efforts. Before that, at the Council on Culture, used to be on Jefferson back in the Model City days, with something called the People's Communications Network, and there were a couple of other ones, Black Communications Collective, different things like that. But all of it started out in terms of my particular involvement with media in terms of audio, video, or video was way back in the half-inch black and white reel-to-reel video days, when we brought Sister Kathleen Cleaver to town as part of the Black Student Union. I was the Minister of Information at Black Student Union at UB at that time. And along with her came a brother named Bill Stevens, who had some videotape equipment. We had never seen people-sized television before. Okay. And he brought this videotape equipment and videotaped the whole thing, and we said, "What is that?" And he showed us, and we said, "Give us a list." And he gave us a list, and being students and dealing with student initiatives, next week we had the whole list, and we called him back down, and he showed us how to use what we had just bought. And from that point on, we began to use the media and document the story that we have as a people.
As we moved into the 1970s, the other TV stations, seeing the response from the community and the need for Black-centered local programming, began to follow the lead of WGR with a variety of their own shows. WBEN on the radio side had already been airing a regular radio program called Viewpoint, hosted by Garfield Hinton. The program was consistent in showcasing blacks on its air, not only on the local side, but on the national side as well. In January of 1971, WBEN Channel 4 produced a TV companion to its radio program. That show was called Identity. The host of that program was Dora Richardson. Hinton served as the show's producer. The first episode aired Saturday, January 30th, from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. and took a special look at the Head Start program of the Community Action Organization. In April of 1972, WUTV Channel 29 aired the half-hour television program Basic Black. The show, which aired every Saturday at 2:30 p.m., was produced by the Employment Information Center and provided an honest and clear picture of employment in the Buffalo area.
Basic Black television program was a demonstration of presenting skills, interview techniques for the perfect match of skills and applicants to a job. And those skills were not really that well understood in the community. So these programs did offer a lot of information and a foundation for getting into that work, and students looking at their present and usually the next couple years of job placements. So we wanted everyone to understand how it was developmental as well as the teaching.
In addition to the public affairs programming, a host of black faces were also beginning to make an impact on the local news as well. Among these trailblazing personalities were Ernie Warlick, who transitioned to television from his career as a Buffalo Bills player, John Winston, Chuck Lampkin, Bob Gist, Sheila Allen, and Juanita Young. The Black Development Foundation, which had already been active in supporting up-and-coming black businesses in the city of Buffalo, was also bit by the television bug and produced the weekly series Building a Decent Future, which featured stories on the Build organization and black entrepreneurship. In the fall of 1974, a new face would come on WKBW Channel 7 in the form of Buffalo police officer Ted Kirkland. Kirkland was a respected officer as well as active in the lives of many of Buffalo's youth. Now, he was given the opportunity to host his very own show called Kirkland and Company.
I think the one that created the most controversy was, and you may have remembered, that there was a young black man who was arrested and accused of attempting rape of a white woman right up there around the hospital someplace. Big story, big thing. So I went out, I got a crew of individuals who went out in the community And I interviewed only white men. And my question to them was, if you were arrested for raping a black woman, would it make any difference to you if if the jury that's going to hear your case was all white? I mean, all black? So what I switched it around from what they were doing in Buffalo. They had because I had the head of jurors on my show, and he said he didn't think it made any difference if the jury was all white and making a decision over this black guy when the victim was white. You see what you follow me? Yeah. So I figured I would switch it around. I'm going to interview white men and ask them, if you have a jury that's all black and you were accused of raping a black woman, is that all right with you? And of the 10 people I interviewed, all of them said, hell no. Now I take that back, and I did a story on that, and there was a big uproar, coming from the rural areas, suburbia, and other places, and people, how dare you do something like that, and I would do it. I'd do it now, it wouldn't make any difference, because I think it's more, it's needed now more than ever before.
On March 29, 1979, Sunship Communications photographer Ron Wooford and Ujima Theater director Lorna Hill joined together with the Build organization to produce a dynamic show called Afro Central. The first episode featured a tour of the Museum of African American Art and Antiquities by Carrie-Amu Welsh and a close-up of Reverend Charlie H. Fisher III. Future episodes focused on the Little Harlem and Langston Hughes Center co-founder Wilhelmina Godfrey. In the early 1980s, the Langston Hughes Institute threw its hat into the media ring with its very own show titled Urban Focus. Among its many features was incidentally a feature on the local black press. As we transitioned from the 1970s into the 80s, the local news stations had also introduced us to a number of fresh young black faces, which would come into our living rooms for years to come. Among them would be Sandy White, Les Trent, Stan Coleman, Nona Barbie, Octavia Hudson, and Daryl Denard. In 1985, the Buffalo Black Media Coalition hosts its first and only Black Media Conference in the city of Buffalo.
We had some very talented and nationally known individuals who come and to participate in our conference. Carol Simpson is one name that comes to my mind, but we had some very high-powered people who are very familiar with the whole field of communications come in and do some workshops for us, and did a lot of encouragement. And as a result of some of that, some of our local people here were able to network with them and go on and get jobs within the field. And right now we were able to, as a consequence of setting up a training program that took place at Channel 7, and a number of individuals went through that program and gone on to larger markets. The same occurred with Channel 4 and Channel 2. Channel 29 at the time was in its infancy. It wasn't doing that much. It had a very small staff. It wasn't aggressive as it is today. Fox Communication. I don't think it was Fox at that time. It was something else. But anyhow, the initiatives that was taken coming out of the conference led to a lot of people getting jobs, and many of them, some of them are working right now in the industry here locally as well as in other cities and larger markets throughout the country. We were advocating at that time for black ownership of radio and television in this local area. And so happened when the FCC made some rulings that prohibit newspapers and ownership of more than one station or something like that within the area, we approached Cap Cities at that time and asked them to consider selling that station to an African American. And fortunately, they took that up, and they did go out and they sought out some African Americans with the potential to buy the station. And as a result of that, they formed a group that came together under Queen City Broadcasting. Bruce Llewellyn was the chairman of that group at that time, and he's out of Philadelphia. He owns a Pepsi pop distribution kind of thing. Very wealthy man and very bright person too. So they and the Congressional Black Caucus and a number of other people got involved in that. And using the FCC and the kind of rebates or assistance that they could get out of the FCC, they were able to purchase that station for, I think it was something like a little over $50 million. And I have to say that they had that assistance because we had a station that was sold just a few months before that for $120 million, which was the number 3 station in town. So they picked up a real nice, investment adventure by doing that. So that's one of the things that came as a consequence of the conference.
Also during this time, the community saw the introduction of cable television, an effort which was led partly by Sonship Communications. In 1987, Sonship would also step up to take the reins as the first operator of the Buffalo Public Access TV channel, which would change the game in local black media for the next 2 decades. This power move would create a unique opportunity for a number of pioneering community producers to walk through the doors of 1420 Main Street and produce a number of new alternative programming to impact on the city of Buffalo for the remainder of the decade.
We were aware of the developments of cable TV and public access in different parts of the country. And when the cable company, I think it was telecommunications, came into Buffalo to ask for the franchise, which means that they would be the only cable company in Buffalo. No one else could come in. Part of the agreement that was set up by Congress was that the cable company would have to provide what we call public access, which means that it would have to have channels set aside for educational use, cultural use, government use, and also for the public. Wow. So we did some research. We actually traveled to different cities like Boston and Chicago and studied what they were doing. And we brought it back to the leadership, the Common Council and the mayor of Buffalo, and said that before you give this company exclusivity to the development of cable in Buffalo, they have to provide public access and they have to support it financially. So we put together a proposal and it was accepted by the council, and we received a contract to operate the public access channels in Buffalo. And we started to develop programming, and we started to outreach training to bring all different parts of the community together. South Buffalo, the East Side, West Side, North Buffalo. Try to bring in all different types of groups to come in and let them know that we could train them and they could make their own TV programs. Wow. And have their vehicle, have a voice,
We take anything from local hip-hop events to political events to various, community events, religious events, and things like that in community. Back then, the system for public access was definitely more involved with the community than it is now. And it was more of a joint venture with all the producers together as one, instead of, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's making $20 a week doing this and this, that, and the other. So it was more unity involved back then.
Whenever someone new came to my show, that was part of my secret. And what that did for the show, and by my showing, like if you came to my show, I would say, but you don't walk across, I say something to attract attention to you. Okay. Okay, now everybody's watching you. Okay? All right. What this did for my show, that was by design. What this did for my show, it increased my popularity every week. Okay? entertainment is a gotta have a gimmick business. Okay,
That's right.
so therefore this. You have brothers, sisters, maybe children, this, that. In other words, you have people that know you throughout the city, right? So if somebody is dial twisting and they're just scanning channels and they see your face, they're gonna stop, right? You want to see what Doug's doing on here. They didn't see him hung up in the post office, you know what I'm saying? Public enemy, you know? So now they want to know what Doug is doing on television. So when they see you on television, then they're gonna get on the phone. Hey, Fred, turn the channel 18 or 12 or whatever channel you're on, and look who's that on TV. That's old Doug, man. What he done did? Man, wait a minute. Let me call Sally. Let me call Martha. Let me, you know, everybody gonna call somebody to see Doug on TV. I just increased my viewership by maybe 20 people. And you do that every week for like 3 years. You got a large viewing audience. You know?
And what we were most proud of, I think, on Aviva for Women, was that we were one of the very few shows. If you look back, and I don't know if there are any archives or anything, I doubt it, we produced a show a week where there were a lot of repetition on the air at that time. We took pride in not doing repeats. We were on the air, and anybody will tell you. Anybody, we took a lot of pride in making sure we were very committed to Aviva for Women. Everybody was. We did not want two or 3 weeks the same thing ran, you know, and those are the kinds of things that used to happen there. We put almost 60 shows in the can in a year. Joy, you talked to Joy. We had about 60 shows. We ran a year, and we did at least 60 shows in a year.
Being an independent producer, as most public access producers are, your time, your limit, and your your time, your money, and your expertise is limited. So many times you have to wear many hats as an independent producer. You have to be.
Don't I know it?
You have
You
have to write. You have to direct. You have to carry all of the equipment, and then you have to wrap it all up after. Many times I would sit here, I would prop the camera up, and then run back and sit and host up the show, and then run back. And
oh, you too, huh?
turn it to the side.
Sometimes I still find myself doing that.
Absolutely. You have to do whatever you have to do to get your production done, and you try to reach a certain quality standard. I mean, public access gets a lot of criticism for bad lighting, bad technique, bad audio, but it has always been my opinion that a lot of that bad quality is aesthetic to public access. And what the viewing folks have to get around is that this is a pretty amateuristic approach to communication by amateurs, and that it's not so much the picture quality or the audio quality that's more likely being judged by the mainstream media's perspective. It's what's being said that's important.
In 1988, we saw the birth of two programs. One was City Rhythm, produced by Bob Jenkins, Kenny Berry, Van Taylor, and hosted by Lou St. James and Don Ronaldo. City Rhythm was a local dance show reminiscent of Soul Train, an American bandstand with its own local flavor. The other program was Buffalo Beat, which followed in the tradition of the many programs that preceded it by keeping their finger on the pulse of the Buffalo community. Buffalo Beat was produced by Sarah Norat Phillips and Jimmy Lyons.
Even in the 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of platforms that mirrored correctly our communities, people, brown and black people, our communities, what's going on economically, spiritually. Those kind of issues were usually not dealt in general unless there was a problem. So Buffalo Beat served a really great purpose in that it enabled people from the community come on and talk about their issues. It was really good. And then I was able to also add, when I joined, that video of, we used to do all kinds of dramatic things, and I would use people from Ujima Theater Company you know, and little comedy bits and things like that. So, but I really have so much appreciation for people like Sarah Narat and WKBW to really have that sense that we need a place to express our grievances, our happiness, just like is relevant today with what's going on in Minnesota. You know, we always have to have a way to communicate what's good with us and what's bothering us. So Buffalo Beat, tremendous.
As we moved into the early 1990s, the landscape of black media began to shift with the changing times. Public affairs programming on the local mainstream channels began to dissipate, leaving only programs like Insight and Buffalo, etc. The reins of public affairs would ultimately be taken up by some public access producers. Sunship's contract with the Access Channel had ended and was now being ran by the Buffalo Cable Access Media Group. Programming on the channel would mostly be anchored by The Mary Davis Show, The Rhythm and Blues Review, and The David Allen Show. The Buffalo Black Media Coalition would also run its course and would be replaced by the Western New York Minority Media Professionals and the Buffalo Association of Black Journalists. In conclusion, the movement of Buffalo Black Media continues to live on through the multitude of new young creatives, along with the continued presence of the seasoned creatives within the local industry. And the Buffalo History Channel salutes them all.